crazy press conference, right? Yep. Really insane press conference. And of course, here's the thing about this. Everybody's picking the press conference apart, and people on the right. I saw Nolte, the great John Nolte, on our site writing. He thought it was great. He said everything that needed to be said. Obviously, Shapiro has a much harsher take. I have a different take than everybody else that I've noticed about two things: why he's doing this stuff, and how I feel about it. Now, I've said all week. I keep saying all week, and I'm getting all this mail and tweets about sending me pictures of the left, the anti-Fa left, and how awful they are. And I know how awful they are. I've been railing against them. I've done videos about them. I've done the whole shows about how awful they are. And I will talk more about that. And as I keep saying, though, these Nazis are in our house. They are in the house of the right, which is the right house to be in. They're in the house of the Constitution. We need to get them out. I have no quarter. I give them no quarter, nothing. I have nothing. Just because, look, people... Just because two people are fighting doesn't mean one side is right, right? Just because there are two people in a fight, it could be the guy who's right is walking down the street somewhere else. And that's what I think is happening. Here is the thing about this press conference, and we will go through it bit by bit. But here's the thing about this press conference that really bugged me. Donald Trump's enemies are some of the worst people in this country. Or let me put it to you this way. They may not be the worst people in the country. They're some of the people doing the most damage to the country. That is the news media. The news media is now a leftist, it's leftist garbage. It's leftist lies. And one of the key reasons Donald Trump was elected was because of his bullish attacks on the news media. I mean, they lied to us for 8 years. They bolstered up Obama. They ran down Bush. They ran down Mitt Romney, a thoroughly decent guy, even if you disagreed with him, totally decent guy. They've been saying the same thing about every Republican. They're now saying about Trump. And if Trump gives them ammunition sometimes, that doesn't change the fact that they have lost all their credibility. I want Donald Trump to stomp these people. I love watching it when he slaps them around. But just because he's fighting the right people doesn't mean he's doing it right. And yesterday I thought he blew an opportunity. I think this is a moment when you can say things that the left, and by which I mean the news media, which is basically now the center of the left, you can say things that will drive them crazy, so crazy that they will drive themselves off a cliff and destroy themselves. But you got to get it right. You got to get it right. Some of the things he did yesterday, I loved. Some of the things Trump did yesterday, I loved. Some of it, I just thought he just wasn't hitting the right notes, and he was giving some kind of shelter to these right-wingers. And I'll talk about why I think he does that in a minute. But let's first talk about the thing that is driving the press insane. It is the idea that there is fault on both sides, and there's just no question that there is fault on both sides. So let's take a cut from this presser. The presser he comes down to announce what was really a good infrastructure idea. It was going to speed up the permit process with infrastructure, which can take up to 20 years. He wants to speed it up to 2 years, and then I think he wants to build a freeway through CNN. I think that's the plan. A train. Maybe that's right. Maybe the bullet train just right through CNN. But obviously the press unleashed on him, and he can't walk away from a fight, and so he went off. And so he starts talking about this fault on both sides. Let's look at cut 5.
When you say the alt-right, define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying,
define it for me. Come on, let's go.
Senator McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at him? Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
This is Senator McCain's statement.
Let me ask you this. What about the fact that they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute. I'm not finished. Fake news. That was a horrible day. I will tell you something. I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you have you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent.
Okay. Now, first of all, this is true. These Antifa people, the Black Lives Matter people, you know, the way the press has handled this, and one of the things I love about our press is you can always count on them to shoot themselves on the foot. You know, I mean, they could have quietly taken him down, but instead, Mitt Romney, one of the stupidest tweets ever, says it's not the same. One side is racist, bigoted Nazis, and the other opposes racism and bigotry. Morally different universes. Totally untrue. It is totally untrue. Black Lives Matter is a racist group. These Antifa people are fascists. They don't oppose anything. They don't believe in free speech. They hit people for having speech. So the press picks up this thing and starts to compare these Antifa people to the military who went and fought the Nazis. But what they're really compared to is the communists who fought with Nazis in the streets of Weimar Germany when both sides were truly evil. So he's right. Now, look, the thing is, a murder was committed at this event, right? A murder was committed by the right, and the right are the people who support Donald Trump. So he should always go out of his way to give them an extra slap in the head. But the press the way the press reacts to this, first, here's Jim Acosta. Here was Jim Acosta reporting on it.
Pay attention to me! Pay attention to me!
Tell her I'm going to dump the apple. All right, that's just Jim Acosta. That's Jim Acosta's id. That's not there. This is the way Acosta reports this thing, this press conference.
If I get up,
Not that one.
and shout like a witch voodoo, would you give a little bit?
The real Jim Acosta.
When the questions started coming in, the real Donald Trump came out, and this is somebody who I think that we're going to look back 10 years from now and observe this moment that we saw unfold here today at Trump Tower as really kind of a turning point in this presidency. It is very difficult to imagine many Republicans in Washington rallying to the president's side after he almost gave the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists a pass for what unfolded in Charlottesville over the weekend. I think it's one of those moments, Wolf, that as it sinks in, the worse it gets. It was that kind of a disaster that we saw here at Trump Tower today, Wolf.
Well, that was objective. That was an objective take on that. So this is a turning point. It's the beginning of the end of the Trump presidency. Let me read you a couple of things. This is from July 13th, 2015. From the New York Times, Nate Cohn. This is the beginning of the end of the Donald Trump surge. Here is Bill Kristol from the Weekly Standard. Trump attacks McCain. Apologize for this pronto. Otherwise, it's the beginning of the end. Here's Cecilia Vega, ABC News. Some now predicting, Martha, this could be the beginning of the end of Trump's candidacy. Ruth Marcus, The Washington Post, on July 19th. And I don't think this is the end, but I think, and this may be a little bit wishful thinking, it might be the beginning of the end. Juliana Goldman, CBS, Republican strategists tell us they think this is the beginning of the end for Trump's candidacy. Kevin, so, it could be that this is not the beginning of the end of Trump's candidacy. And I will tell you why. I mean, the thing is, he's right about this. Even, people say, well, this was not the time to say it. And I have some sympathy with this. I wish he had said it better. I wish he had said it better. But listen to the New York Times react to this. The New York Times says, what about the alt-left? Here's the answer. Antifa, or anti-fascist activists, certainly used clubs and dyed liquids against the white supremacists, according to our own reporter, the New York Times reporter Cheryl Gay Stolberg and Hawes Spencer, who covered the violence. Other counter-protesters included nonviolent clergy members. But there's one stark difference between the violence on the two sides. The police said that James Alex Fields Jr. of Ohio drove his car into a crowd and killed at least one person, Heather Heyer. Mr. Fields was charged with second-degree murder. And then they go on to use a quote to say what they want to say. Comparing Antifa to Mr. Fields' act is like comparing a propeller plane to a C-130 transport, said the director of the Center for Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University. They say overall, says the New York Times, far-right extremist plots have been far more deadly than far-left plots. This is their excuse. And Islamist plots eclipse both in the past 25 years, according to a breakdown of 2 terrorism databases by Alex Nowasta at the Cato Institute. I know Alex, really smart guy, really honest, direct guy. So I went to his study. Now, here's the thing about these stupid studies about how deadly these people are, because it's like comparing women's suicide and men's suicide. Women commit suicide more often, but men succeed more because they use guns. So you're just talking about efficiency. You're not talking about intent, you know. The thing about this is, Islamists have killed 97% of the people who have been killed by terrorists since I don't know what it is, since 1992, I think it is. But of course, most of those people were killed on 9/11. Right-wing terrorists have killed many more people than left-wing terrorists, but most of those people were killed at the Oklahoma City bombing. If you look at the last year, 2016, then left-wing terrorists have killed almost twice as many as right-wing terrorists, all right? So these are bad people. Trump is right. They're just all bad people. There's no making excuses for these guys. There's no comparing them to the soldiers who fought against the Nazis. These are all junky people, you know? And so Trump is right about this, but it's when he starts to kind of wax sentimental about the people who are out, you know, protesting. He says, here, play number 7 from this press conference.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Yeah, not so much. Not so many fine people in the Nazi ranks. And the people protesting against the Nazis, there were fine people. There were people who weren't on the alt-left. There were clergymen. Look, everybody should hate these guys. You know, there's no excuse for this stuff. There's not, you know, and the racism, the stuff about whiteness, and that's what we're going to talk about next, is why this is a special bad point and why it sucks people in. So underneath all this, there is a big issue, which is an issue about race. And Charles Krauthammer, as he so often does, kind of hit on this, but he had a slightly different take on it than what I would have said. But let's play why Krauthammer felt this press conference was a disgrace.
The reason it's a moral disgrace is this. This generation, for the last 50, 60 years, all the modern presidents, you know, you can go all the way back, you can say Woodrow Wilson was exempt, but beyond that, understood there was something unique about the history of slavery and racism in this country, that we had to cure this original sin. It was not cured by the Civil War as Lincoln had hoped, because it was followed by 100 years of state-sponsored oppression. It began to be cured with civil rights, equality of rights, and this generation, the last 50 or so years, has done a splendid job in redeeming itself. What Trump is missing here is the uniqueness of white supremacy, KKK, and Nazism. Yes, there were bad guys on both sides. That's not the point. This was instituted, the riot began over a Nazi riot, a Nazi rally. And the only killing here occurred by one of the pro-Nazi, pro-KKK people.
See, this is the thing, and I bet I know what you're thinking right now, is that, you know, yes, but. Okay. I think that this is what Trump is addressing, and I think it's what he's playing off in people, is we're tired of it. You know, I think we are tired of the race thing being thrown on in our faces, especially after 8 years of Barack Obama. Because, you know, to be fair, and this is not whataboutism, I'm making a point about race, but Obama did this both sides thing too. Remember, 5 police officers were killed by Black Lives Matter crazies in Dallas, and he went to the memorial of these guys, and this was part of his speech at the memorial of 5 dead police officers killed, I thought, because he had ginned up a lot of this feeling. Remember, things got much worse. Racial relations got much worse under Obama. And this is part of the speech he made at the memorial.
when study after study shows that whites and people of color experience the criminal justice system differently. So that if you're black, you're more likely to be pulled over or searched or arrested, more likely to get longer sentences, more likely to get the death penalty for the same crime. When mothers and fathers raise their kids right and have the talk about how to respond if stopped by a police officer, yes, sir, no, sir, but still fear that something terrible may happen when their child walks out the door, still fear that kids being stupid and not quite doing things right might end in tragedy. When all this takes place more than 50 years after the passage of the Civil Rights Act, we cannot simply turn away and dismiss those in peaceful protest as troublemakers or paranoid.
See, now, yesterday people took pictures, kind of comical pictures of John Kelly, chief of staff, listening to this Trump presser with his head hung down. But if you look behind Obama, there are cops glaring at him and refusing to join in the applause for what he said. And I don't blame them. Was that the time? Was that the time to bring up these studies which don't say, never have said what Obama said they said? That the study after study actually shows that cops don't use deadly force more often against blacks than they do against whites. They use it more often against whites than against blacks. Was that the time? Of course it wasn't. Of course it wasn't. And so he was never called out. He was never called out for that kind of both sides-ism, let's call it that, both sides-ism. And of course, Trump, the minute he opens his mouth, he is called out for it. Krauthammer is right. Krauthammer is right. It is a special thing in this country, just like it's a special thing in Germany. You know, in Germany, they outlaw this Nazi salute, Sieg Heil. It's against the law to say it. And as an American, you think like, wow, that's a violation of free speech. But you got to understand their history. Their history is blood-soaked from that, you know, and they're still traumatized over it, and they haven't gotten past it. So this is a special part of American history. It's a special part of American history. And what Trump is catching on to is he's catching on to the fact that Obama played the race card for 8 years, and white people are sick of it. They are sick of being blamed for something they didn't do. They're sick of being blamed for refighting the Civil War. They're sick of being told, why are we even talking about the Confederacy? It's like over 150 years ago. It's time to let it go. They're sick of it, and Trump has caught on to that. Here's the problem and this has always been a problem with Trump. He's fighting the right people, and sometimes he's even fighting the right battle. He could have said exactly what I just said now, and the press would have gone just as insane, but he wouldn't have been saying there were good people on both sides, which just isn't true. It's just not true, and it isn't true. You know, he could have said what needed to be said, and he could have blown the press up, and he could have made his point if he had been reaching out to all of us, all the good people on both sides. And here, there are wonderful people on both sides of the political divide in this country. And if you don't believe that, you're not paying attention. There are wonderful people on both sides of the political divide. And we all hate these people. We all hate these Nazis. That's why the press is so evil. That they compare these guys to the GIs who fought Hitler instead of comparing them to the people they should be comparing them to, the communists who fought in the streets against the Nazis and were just as bad. Where the communists won, they slaughtered tens of millions, and where the Nazis won, they slaughtered tens of millions. They were the bad guys. It's the guys who don't sign on to the isms but believe in freedom, believe in the individual. Those are the guys who don't leave trails of dead in their past. Trump could have said it. He could have said it, and my score against him is that he blew an opportunity to nail the people that we dislike, who are hurting this country, and to speak up for all of us, on the left too. He is the president of everybody, to speak up for everybody who just hates all these people as they deserve. The only good people at those rallies were the people who were praying for peace. The clergymen and the people following the clergymen. It sounded like the lady who was killed was one of them. She was not linked to Antifa in any way. Those are the people that he should have been speaking to when he spoke, instead of making it a battle between him and the press, which is entertaining. We love to see it. It was a moment when he needed to be the president, needed to reach out to everybody. I think he stepped on the mine of his own anger and of his own pugilism, and he blew an opportunity. I don't think it's the beginning of the end of his presidency. I think the press is going to blow themselves up the same way as he did, and I think it's going to be a tie. All right, let's.